The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in Angels Camp, California, and by noon, Wilhelmina Harper's entire world had collapsed around her like a poorly constructed mine shaft. She stood in the dusty parlor of the boarding house where she had been staying for 3 weeks, staring at the crumpled paper in her trembling hands while Mrs. Patterson, the landlady, clucked her tongue with obvious satisfaction at someone else's misfortune. "I told you those mail-order arrangements rarely work out," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "A man wants a wife who can keep a proper home, not some city girl who doesn't know a Dutch oven from a warming pan." Wilhelmina felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she refused to give the old woman the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She had traveled all the way from Boston in September of 1876, enduring 2 weeks of rattling train rides and uncomfortable stagecoaches, to marry a man named Gerald Hutchins who owned a general store in Angels Camp. They had exchanged letters for 6 months, his words painting pictures of a prosperous life in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, of a comfortable home and a future filled with promise. He had never once mentioned that he expected a wife who could prepare elaborate meals and preserve vegetables and bake bread from scratch. Her mother had been wealthy enough to employ a cook throughout Wilhelmina's childhood, and after her parents died in a carriage accident 2 years ago, she had been living with her aunt, who also kept household staff. Wilhelmina had learned embroidery, piano, literature, and how to manage household accounts, but she had never been taught to cook. It had never seemed important until 3 days ago when Gerald invited her to prepare dinner at his home as a sort of test before the wedding. The disaster had been absolute. She had burned the roast beyond recognition, added salt instead of sugar to the apple pie, and somehow managed to curdle the cream sauce. Gerald had watched with increasing horror as each dish emerged more catastrophic than the last. This morning he had sent the telegram. "Cannot marry a woman who cannot feed a family. Will send money for return passage. You'll need to vacate your room by tomorrow," Mrs. Patterson continued, clearly enjoying herself. "I have another boarder arriving, and I cannot hold the space without payment." Wilhelmina folded the telegram carefully and placed it in the pocket of her green traveling dress. "I understand. Thank you for your hospitality." She walked out of the boarding house with her head high. But once she reached the wooden sidewalk that ran along Main Street, the reality of her situation crashed over her like a wave. She had used most of her small inheritance to pay for the journey west. She had perhaps $20 remaining, not nearly enough to book passage back to Boston, even if she wanted to return to her aunt's house and face the humiliation of a failed engagement. Angels Camp bustled with activity around her. Miners with dirt-stained clothes emerged from supply shops, their pockets heavy with gold dust from the claims scattered through the hills. Freight wagons rumbled past, hauling timber and ore. The town had grown rapidly since the gold rush days, though the easy pickings were long gone. Now it took hard work and determination to extract wealth from these mountains, qualities Wilhelmina had always believed she possessed, until Gerald Hutchins had made her feel worthless. She walked without direction, her boots clicking against the wooden planks, until she found herself at the edge of town near a modest ranch house with a large corral. Several horses moved within the enclosure, and she could see a man working with a young colt, his movements patient and deliberate. Something about the peaceful scene made her stop. The man was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and dark brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. He wore typical cowboy attire: worn denim pants, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up, scuffed leather boots, and a brown hat that had seen better days. As Wilhelmina watched, The colt suddenly spooked and reared, but the man remained calm, speaking in low tones she could not quite hear until the animal settled. "You lost, miss?" Wilhelmina startled. She had not realized the man had noticed her standing there. He had moved closer to the fence, and now she could see his face clearly. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, perhaps 26 or 27, with strong features, dark eyes, and the weathered look of someone who spent most of his time outdoors. There was kindness in his expression, genuine curiosity rather than the judgment she had been facing all morning. "No," she said, then reconsidered. "Yes, perhaps I am lost." He tilted his head slightly. "That sounds like there might be a story behind it, not a particularly interesting one." Wilhelmina tried to smile, but her lips trembled with the effort. Just another foolish woman who came west with romantic notions and discovered reality is far less accommodating. The man studied her for a long moment, then made a decision. He opened the corral gate and stepped through, latching it carefully behind him. Up close, he was even taller than she had thought, with broad shoulders and calloused hands that spoke of hard work. "Name's Nathan Aldrich. I train horses, among other things. Wilhelmina Harper." She offered her hand, and he shook it with surprising gentleness. "I apologize for disturbing your work." "You're not disturbing anything. That colt needs a break anyway, and so do I." Nathan gestured toward the ranch house. "My sister Emily just made a fresh pot of coffee. You look like you could use some." Wilhelmina knew she should decline. She did not know this man, and accepting his hospitality might be improper. But she was exhausted and heartsick, and the thought of returning to Mrs. Patterson's judgmental boarding house made her feel ill. "That would be very kind. Thank you." The ranch house was small but well-maintained, with a covered porch and curtains in the windows. Nathan led her inside, where a young woman with the same dark hair and eyes was rolling out dough on a kitchen table. She looked up in surprise when they entered. This is Miss Wilhelmina Harper. She could use some coffee and maybe a friendly face." "Wilhelmina, this is my sister Emily." Emily wiped her flour-covered hands on her apron and smiled warmly. "Of course. Please sit down, Miss Harper. You do look like you have had quite a morning." The kitchen was cozy and filled with the scent of baking bread. Wilhelmina sank into one of the wooden chairs at the table, feeling some of the tension drain from her shoulders. Emily poured coffee into thick ceramic mugs and set one in front of her. "Thank you," Wilhelmina said, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "You are both very kind to a stranger." "Not many strangers in Angel's Camp," Emily said, settling into another chair while Nathan leaned against the counter. "Word travels fast in a small town." "You are the lady from Boston who was supposed to marry Gerald Hutchins, are you not?" Wilhelmina's heart sank. "Word travels very fast, it seems." "Gerald's an idiot," Nathan said bluntly. Emily shot him a look, but he shrugged. "He is." Anyone with eyes could see he was looking for a servant, not a wife. "He wanted someone who could cook," Wilhelmina said quietly. "That is not an unreasonable expectation. I simply cannot provide it. I never learned, and apparently I have no natural talent for it whatsoever." Emily made a sympathetic sound. "What happened?" "I burned everything. The meat was charred, the pie was inedible, and I somehow destroyed a cream sauce that I am told is quite simple to prepare." Wilhelmina stared into her coffee, remembering the look of disgust on Gerald's face. "He sent a telegram this morning calling off the engagement. Mrs. Patterson has given me until tomorrow to vacate my room, and I have no idea what to do next." The kitchen fell silent except for the ticking of a clock on the wall. Wilhelmina waited for the sympathy tinged with judgment, the subtle suggestions that she return to where she came from, the confirmation that she did not belong in this rough frontier town. Instead, Nathan said, I will teach you. Wilhelmina looked up sharply. I beg your pardon. I will teach you how to cook. He said it as simply as if he were offering to teach her to ride a horse or mend a fence. If that is what you want, if you want to learn. Nathan, Emily said slowly, that is a very generous offer, but what? Nathan looked at his sister. We have the space. We have the time. And unless I miss my guess, Miss Harper here is not ready to give up and go running back east just because one pompous store owner decided she was not good enough. He was right. Wilhelmina was not ready to give up. The thought of returning to Boston, of admitting defeat, of spending the rest of her life as a charity case in her aunt's house, made her feel desperate. But accepting help from a stranger, a man she had just met, seemed equally impossible. I could not impose, she began. You would not be imposing, Emily said, and there was genuine warmth in her voice. Nathan is right. We have space, and honestly, I could use another woman around here. These cowboys my brother associates with are not exactly sparkling conversationalists. I have no money to pay you, Wilhelmina admitted, hating how the words sounded. Not enough for room and board, at any rate. Then you will work, Nathan said practically. Help Emily with the household tasks, learn as you go, and maybe assist with the horses if you are interested. We are not running a charity, but we are not heartless either. Everyone deserves a chance to learn what they need to know. Wilhelmina looked between them, these two kind strangers who were offering her a lifeline when she had expected nothing but more rejection. Why would you do this? You do not even know me. Nathan was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes thoughtful. When I was 18, I did not know the first thing about horses. Thought I did, but I was ignorant and arrogant. A man named Jack Morrison took me in, taught me everything he knew, and never asked for anything except that I work hard and pay attention. He died 3 years ago, and I promised myself I would do the same for others if I ever got the chance. Maybe this is that chance. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Wilhelmina felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them away. I work very hard. I may not know how to cook, but I can clean, I can manage accounts, I can read and write. I will earn my keep. I do not doubt it, Emily said with a smile. Then it is settled. Let me show you where you will sleep, and then we can begin your education in the culinary arts. The room Emily showed her was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the hills. It was more than Wilhelmina had hoped for an hour ago when her future had seemed impossibly bleak. She set down her small traveling bag and took a deep breath. Thank you, she said to Emily. Both of you, I will not let you down. I know you will not, Emily replied. Now, let us start with something simple. Do you know how to boil water? The first lesson was humbling. Wilhelmina discovered that she did not even know how to properly stoke the kitchen stove to achieve the right temperature. Emily showed her how to add wood, how to adjust the dampers, how to test the heat with her hand. It was tedious and frustrating, but Emily was patient, explaining each step clearly and never making Wilhelmina feel stupid for her ignorance. Nathan came in halfway through the afternoon, dusty and smelling of horses. He washed his hands at the pump and watched as Wilhelmina attempted to peel potatoes without wasting half the vegetable. You are gripping the knife too tight, he said, moving closer. Here, let me show you. He stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, and demonstrated the proper technique. His hands were steady and sure, the movements practiced and efficient. Wilhelmina tried to copy him, and while her result was far from perfect, it was an improvement. Better, Nathan said with an approving nod. You will get the feel for it. That night, they sat down to a simple meal of beef stew, fresh bread, and apple butter. Wilhelmina had helped prepare the vegetables and set the table, small contributions that nevertheless made her feel useful. The stew was delicious, rich and savory, and the bread was still warm from the oven. "Emily, this is wonderful," Wilhelmina said sincerely. "Someday I hope to cook half as well as you do." "You will," Emily assured her. "It just takes practice and patience. By the time we are done with you, you will be able to prepare a meal that would make any man grateful." Wilhelmina thought about Gerald Hutchins and felt a flash of anger. She did not want to learn to cook, to make some man grateful. She wanted to learn for herself, to prove that she was capable of mastering something that had defeated her so completely. But she kept those thoughts to herself and simply nodded. Over the following days, Wilhelmina settled into a routine at the Aldrich ranch. She woke early, helped Emily prepare breakfast, and then spent the mornings learning various cooking techniques. Emily was an excellent teacher, patient and encouraging, never criticizing when Wilhelmina made mistakes, but instead showing her how to correct them. They started with simple dishes: scrambled eggs, pancakes, boiled vegetables. Gradually, they moved on to more complex preparations: roasted chicken, biscuits, pie crusts. In the afternoons, Wilhelmina helped with household chores, learning to properly clean the stove, wash dishes efficiently, and manage the larder. She discovered she had a good head for organization, and Emily soon trusted her to plan meals based on what ingredients they had available. Nathan was often out working with the horses, but he made a point of checking on her progress. Sometimes he would join her in the kitchen, offering tips and encouragement. Other times he would simply sit at the table and talk while she worked, telling her stories about the horses he trained and the people he met. She found herself looking forward to those conversations. Nathan had a dry sense of humor and a thoughtful way of looking at the world. He had been born in Missouri, he told her, and came west with Emily after their parents died in a cholera outbreak. They had been in Angel's Camp for 5 years, building the ranch slowly through hard work and careful saving. "You ever miss Missouri?" Wilhelmina asked one afternoon while she was learning to knead bread dough. Her arms ached from the effort, but Emily had assured her that was normal. "Sometimes," Nathan admitted. He was sitting at the table mending a bridle with practiced hands, but not enough to go back. "This is home now." "What about you? Do you miss Boston?" Wilhelmina considered the question. "I miss certain things. The theaters, the libraries, the feeling of walking down streets I have known my entire life. But I do not miss the suffocation of society expectations, the constant judgment, the sense that my entire worth was measured by my family name and connections." "Is that why you answered Gerald's advertisement?" "Partly. Mostly I wanted a fresh start, a place where I could be more than just someone's niece or daughter." She punched down the dough with more force than necessary, remembering Gerald's dismissive telegram. "That did not work out as planned." "Maybe it worked out exactly as it was supposed to," Nathan said quietly. "Just not in the way you expected." Their eyes met across the kitchen, and Wilhelmina felt something shift in her chest. She looked away quickly, focusing on the dough, but she could not shake the feeling that something important had just passed between them. 2 weeks after her arrival at the ranch, Wilhelmina successfully prepared her first complete meal without assistance: fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and buttermilk biscuits. She had been terrified of failure, checking and rechecking each step, but everything had turned out perfectly. The chicken was golden and crispy, the potatoes were smooth and creamy, the beans were tender, and the biscuits were fluffy and light. Nathan took his first bite and closed his eyes. "This is delicious." "Truly." Wilhelmina felt absurdly pleased. "You are not just being kind." "I am never just kind about food," Nathan said with a grin. "This is genuinely good, Wilhelmina. You should be proud." She was proud. For the first time since arriving in California, she felt capable and competent. She had learned a new skill through determination and hard work, and the satisfaction was immense. After dinner, Nathan asked if she would like to see the horses. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the evening air was pleasantly cool. They walked to the corral together, and Nathan introduced her to each horse by name, explaining their personalities and quirks. "This is Duchess," he said, stroking the nose of a pretty bay mare. "She is gentle and smart. Would you like to try riding her sometime?" "I have never ridden a horse," Wilhelmina admitted. "In Boston, we traveled by carriage. Then I will teach you that too if you want." Nathan smiled at her, and in the fading light, his face was open and handsome. "I seem to be making a habit of teaching you things. You are a good teacher." Wilhelmina reached out tentatively to touch Duchess's soft nose. The mare huffed warm breath against her palm, and she laughed with delight. "She is beautiful. She likes you." Nathan moved closer, guiding Wilhelmina's hand to stroke the mare's neck. Animals are good judges of character. They stood there together in the twilight, the warmth of Nathan's body close to hers, his hand gently directing her movements. Wilhelmina's heart was beating faster than it should, and she realized with sudden clarity that her feelings for Nathan had shifted from gratitude to something deeper and more complicated. She stepped back quickly, suddenly flustered. "I should help Emily with the dishes." If Nathan noticed her confusion, he did not comment on it. "Of course. Thank you for dinner. It really was excellent." Wilhelmina hurried back to the house, her thoughts in turmoil. She could not be developing feelings for Nathan Aldrich. She had known him for only 2 weeks. She was supposed to have married Gerald Hutchins. She had no business thinking about another man, especially one who had shown her nothing but kindness, and who deserved better than a woman with romantic confusion. But as she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, she could not stop thinking about the way Nathan had smiled at her, the way his hand had felt guiding hers, the warmth in his dark eyes when he looked at her. She was in trouble, and she knew it. The next morning, Wilhelmina woke determined to focus on her tasks and nothing else. She helped Emily prepare breakfast, concentrating fiercely on getting the eggs just right and the bacon perfectly crisp. When Nathan came in from the morning chores, she barely looked at him, afraid her face would betray her confused emotions. "Everything all right?" Emily asked after Nathan had left to work with a new horse. "Of course. Why would you ask?" Emily gave her a knowing look. "You were quieter than usual during breakfast. Did something happen?" Wilhelmina considered lying but decided Emily deserved honesty. "I think I am developing feelings for your brother, and it is terribly inconvenient." To her surprise, Emily laughed. "Inconvenient? How is that inconvenient?" "Because he has been nothing but kind to me. He took me in when I had nowhere to go. He is teaching me skills I desperately needed, and he treats me with respect. The last thing he needs is me complicating everything with inappropriate romantic notions." Emily set down the dish towel she had been holding and looked at Wilhelmina seriously. "Can I tell you something? Please do. Nathan talks about you constantly. What you learned that day, how hard you are working, how clever you are, how determined. Yesterday he spent 10 minutes describing the way you laughed when Duchess nuzzled your pocket looking for treats. I have not seen him this interested in anyone since Sarah Jennings broke his heart 3 years ago." Wilhelmina's breath caught. He was engaged. Not quite. They were courting, and everyone assumed they would marry. Then Sarah's father struck gold, real gold, and suddenly she decided a horse trainer was not good enough for her. She married a mine owner from Sacramento and never looked back. Emily's expression was sympathetic. It hurt Nathan badly. He has been cautious about women ever since. I would never do that to him, Wilhelmina said fiercely. I do not care about gold or wealth. I have learned what truly matters. I believe you, Emily said gently, but Nathan does not know that yet. He is protecting himself. So if you have feelings for him, you are going to have to be patient and let him come to trust them. Wilhelmina nodded, absorbing this information. She understood self-protection. She had built her own walls after her parents died, afraid to care too much about anything for fear of losing it. But those walls were crumbling now, worn down by Nathan's steady kindness and genuine character. I can be patient, she said finally. I am learning that good things take time. Over the following weeks, Wilhelmina continued to develop her skills in the kitchen and around the ranch. Emily taught her to preserve fruits and vegetables for the winter, to bake bread that rose perfectly every time, to prepare cuts of meat she had never encountered in Boston. Wilhelmina absorbed every lesson eagerly, her confidence growing with each success. Nathan kept his promise to teach her to ride. They started with basic lessons in the corral, with Nathan patiently explaining how to sit in the saddle, how to hold the reins, how to communicate with the horse through subtle shifts of weight and pressure. Duchess was patient with her fumbling attempts, and gradually Wilhelmina began to feel comfortable on horseback. You are a natural, Nathan said one afternoon after she had successfully guided Duchess through a series of turns and stops. Most people take much longer to develop that kind of feel for it. I have an excellent teacher, Wilhelmina replied, flushed with pride and exertion, though I suspect Duchess deserves most of the credit. She is a good mare, Nathan agreed. He moved closer, adjusting her stirrup length with practiced ease. But you are doing the work. Give yourself some credit. His hand brushed against her leg as he worked, and even through the fabric of her riding skirt, Wilhelmina felt the touch like a spark. Nathan seemed to feel it too because he stepped back quickly, his expression unreadable. That should be better, he said, his voice slightly rough. Try walking her around again. The tension between them was growing, an unspoken awareness that colored every interaction. Wilhelmina caught Nathan watching her sometimes with an expression she could not quite interpret. She knew he was aware of her in the same way she was aware of him, like a constant low hum of consciousness that never quite went away. But he never acted on it, never said anything that crossed the line from friendly to romantic. Emily's words echoed in her mind. Nathan was protecting himself. He had been hurt before, and he was cautious. So Wilhelmina focused on being the best version of herself she could be. She worked hard, learned quickly, and tried to show Nathan through actions rather than words that she was someone he could trust. She helped repair fences, learned to muck out stalls, and even assisted with grooming the horses. The work was hard and often dirty, completely unlike her life in Boston, but she found herself loving every minute of it. In early November, a letter arrived from Wilhelmina's aunt in Boston. She opened it with trepidation, unsure what to expect. My dear Wilhelmina, the letter began. I was distressed to receive your letter about the broken engagement, but I confess I am not entirely surprised. Gerald Hutchins always struck me as a small-minded man, and you deserve far better. However, I worry about your current situation. Living with strangers, learning to cook and work with horses, it all sounds terribly inappropriate and beneath your station. I have arranged for you to return home. The money for your passage is enclosed. Please book the next available train and come back to Boston where you belong. Your loving Aunt Catherine. Wilhelmina stared at the letter for a long time, then at the bank draft that had been enclosed. It was enough to cover her journey back to Boston with money left over. A month ago, she would have been relieved. Now the thought of leaving Angel's camp, Leaving the Aldrich ranch, leaving Nathan, filled her with a pain so acute it took her breath away. "Bad news?" Nathan asked. He had just come in from outside, his shirt dusty and his hair windswept. "My aunt wants me to come back to Boston. She sent money for the journey." Nathan's expression went carefully blank. "I see. When will you leave?" "I am not going." The words came out with absolute certainty. "I am going to write to her and explain that I have found a new life here, one that suits me far better than anything Boston could offer." Something flickered in Nathan's eyes, there and gone so quickly she almost missed it. Relief. Hope. "You are sure? You would be giving up a lot." "Family, social position, comfort." "I would be giving up a cage," Wilhelmina corrected. "Here I have freedom, I have skills, I have a purpose, I have friends." She paused, then added more quietly, "I have reasons to stay." Nathan studied her face, and the moment stretched between them, taut with unspoken words. Finally, he said, "I am glad. We would miss you if you left, Emily and I both." It was not quite a declaration, but it was something. Wilhelmina smiled at him, hoping her expression conveyed what she could not yet say aloud. "I would miss you too, both of you." That evening, Wilhelmina wrote a long letter to her aunt, explaining her decision to remain in California. She described the ranch, the work she was doing, the skills she had learned. She tried to make her aunt understand that she was happy, truly happy, for the first time since her parents had died. She did not mention Nathan by name, but she suspected her aunt would read between the lines and understand. There was more to the story than Wilhelmina was ready to share. Winter was approaching, and the hills around Angel's Camp were turning gold and brown. The air grew crisp at night, and Emily started preparing the house for the colder months ahead. Wilhelmina helped enthusiastically, learning to make hearty stews and soups, to bake pies with preserved fruits, to prepare warming drinks. One cold afternoon in late November, Nathan asked Wilhelmina if she would like to ride out to see one of the neighboring ranches. "Tom Morrison, Jack's son, is selling some of his father's old tack. I thought you might like to come along, see more of the area." Wilhelmina agreed immediately. She had become comfortable riding Duchess, and the thought of spending time alone with Nathan, away from Emily's knowing glances, was appealing. They rode out under a gray sky that threatened rain. Nathan pointed out various landmarks as they traveled. An old mining claim that had played out years ago, the remains of a cabin from the gold rush days, a creek that would swell with snowmelt in the spring. Wilhelmina listened with fascination, seeing the landscape through Nathan's eyes. Tom Morrison's ranch was smaller than the Aldrich place, but well-maintained. Tom himself was a weathered man in his 50s who greeted Nathan warmly and eyed Wilhelmina with friendly curiosity. "This the young lady I heard about, the one who sent Gerald Hutchins packing?" Wilhelmina flushed. "He sent me packing, actually. I could not cook." Tom laughed, a booming sound that seemed too large for his thin frame. "Well, good riddance to him. Man who judges a woman by her biscuits has his priorities all wrong. Excuse my saying so, but Gerald was always a pompous fool." "I am learning to make excellent biscuits now," Wilhelmina said with a smile. "So perhaps I will have my revenge by becoming a better cook than he ever deserved." "That is the spirit." Tom clapped Nathan on the shoulder. "I like her. You should keep this one around." Nathan's ears went slightly red, but he did not correct Tom's implication. They examined the tack together, and Nathan selected several pieces, negotiating a fair price with Tom. As they prepared to leave, the threatened rain finally arrived, starting as a light drizzle but quickly building to a downpour. "You two better get back before this gets worse," Tom warned. "This looks like it might turn into a real storm." They rode hard, but the rain intensified, soaking through their coats and turning the trail slippery. Duchess handled the conditions well, but Wilhelmina was cold and wet by the time a small lined shack came into view. "In here," Nathan shouted over the sound of the rain. He dismounted quickly and helped Wilhelmina down, then led both horses under the shack's small overhang before opening the door. The lined shack was tiny and dusty, clearly unused for some time, but it was dry. Nathan found some old blankets in a trunk and shook them out, then built a fire in the small stove using wood from a stack beside it. Soon the shack was warming up, though both of them were still soaked. "We will wait here until the worst of it passes," Nathan said, stripping off his wet coat and hanging it near the stove. "Are you all right?" "Just cold," Wilhelmina admitted. Her teeth were chattering and her dress was plastered to her body. "That came on fast." "November storms do that sometimes." Nathan found another blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Here, sit close to the stove. You need to get warm." They huddled near the small stove, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. The shack felt isolated from the rest of the world, a small bubble of warmth in the midst of the storm. Nathan sat close beside her, and Wilhelmina was intensely aware of him, of the way his wet shirt clung to his shoulders, of the way he smelled like rain and horse and something uniquely him. "Thank you for bringing me today," she said quietly. "I enjoyed meeting Tom. He liked you." Nathan was staring at the stove, his profile illuminated by the firelight. "Most people do. I like it here. In California, I mean. I never expected to, but I do." "What did you expect?" Wilhelmina thought about it. "I do not know. Something rougher, perhaps, more lawless. I thought everyone would be prospectors and gamblers and people running from something. I did not expect to find communities, families, people building real lives." "That is what most of us are doing," Nathan said. "Building lives. Some folks come west running from things, sure, but most come running towards something. Opportunity, freedom, a fresh start." "What were you running toward?" Wilhelmina asked. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. "A place where I could matter, where I could build something with my own hands and know it was mine, where I did not have to be what anyone expected me to be." He turned to look at her, his dark eyes serious. "What about you? What were you running toward when you came west?" "I thought I was running toward security," Wilhelmina admitted. "A husband, a home, a defined role. But I think I was actually running toward the possibility of being more than what Boston would let me be. I just did not realize it until everything fell apart." "Sometimes things have to fall apart so better things can come together," Nathan said softly. They were very close now, the blanket wrapped around both of them. Wilhelmina could feel the heat of Nathan's body, could see the way his gaze dropped to her lips and then back to her eyes. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Wilhelmina," Nathan said, his voice rough, "I need to tell you something. Yes, I am falling in love with you." The words came out in a rush, as if he had been holding them back for too long. "I have been fighting it because I was afraid, because I have been hurt before, because it seemed impossible that someone like you could care about someone like me. But I cannot keep pretending I do not feel what I feel. You are brave and determined and kind, and every day I watch you work so hard to learn and grow, and I just keep falling deeper." Wilhelmina's breath caught. "Nathan, you do not have to say anything," he interrupted quickly. "I know this is complicated. I know you came here expecting to marry someone else. I just needed you to know. I needed to be honest. No, you do not understand." Wilhelmina reached up and cupped his face with her hand, feeling the roughness of his jaw under her palm. "I have been falling in love with you too. I did not want to because I was afraid of complicating things, afraid of taking advantage of your kindness. But Nathan, you have given me so much more than cooking lessons. You have given me confidence, purpose, a sense of belonging. You have made me believe I can be more than I ever thought possible." Nathan stared at her, and she watched hope bloom in his expression. "You mean it?" "I mean it," she whispered. He kissed her then, soft and tentative at first, then deeper as she responded. Wilhelmina wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing close, pouring all her feeling into the kiss. It felt like coming home, like finding something she had not known she was searching for. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I did not plan this. I did not plan any of it. Neither did I. But I am so glad it happened." Wilhelmina smiled at him, feeling light and happy and completely certain. "I think maybe Gerald Hutchins rejecting me was the best thing that ever happened to me." Nathan laughed and kissed her again. They stayed in the line shack until the rain eased, wrapped in each other's arms, making quiet plans and promises. By the time they rode back to the ranch, both of them knew that something fundamental had shifted. They were no longer just teacher and student, or employer and employee. They were partners, building toward a shared future. Emily took one look at their faces when they returned and smiled knowingly. "I thought that might happen eventually. It is about time you two figured it out." Over the following weeks, Nathan and Wilhelmina's relationship deepened and grew. They were careful to maintain propriety, conscious of Emily's presence and the small-town gossip that could damage reputations. But they spent as much time together as possible, talking and laughing and learning about each other. Nathan told her about his childhood in Missouri, about losing his parents and taking responsibility for Emily when he was barely 18 himself. He spoke of the hard early years in California, the struggles to establish the ranch, the satisfaction of finally achieving stability and success. Wilhelmina shared her own stories of growing up in Boston society, the suffocating expectations, the loneliness after her parents died. She described her aunt's well-meaning but controlling nature, the sense that she was living someone else's life rather than her own. "I feel like myself here," she told Nathan one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "For the first time in years, I feel like the person I am supposed to be." "You are exactly the person you are supposed to be," Nathan said, taking her hand. "Strong, capable, determined. I am proud of you." Those words meant more to Wilhelmina than any compliment she had ever received in Boston drawing rooms. Nathan's pride was earned through her own efforts, not inherited through family name or social position. In mid-December, Nathan asked Wilhelmina to marry him. They were in the barn, checking on a mare who was due to foal soon, when he suddenly turned to her and said, "Will you be my wife?" Wilhelmina laughed at the abruptness of it. "That is your proposal," Nathan looked sheepish. "I have been planning something more romantic, but I cannot wait any longer. I love you. I want to build a life with you. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Wilhelmina said, pulling him close. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married on Christmas Day, 1876, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Angel's Camp. Emily stood up as Wilhelmina's witness, and Tom Morrison served as Nathan's. Wilhelmina wore a simple blue dress that Emily had helped her sew, and Nathan wore his best shirt and jacket, his hair neatly combed for once. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed her with such tenderness that Wilhelmina felt tears sting her eyes. They were married. They were building a life together. Everything that had seemed so impossible 3 months ago had become beautifully, wonderfully real. The wedding celebration was small but joyful. Several neighbors came by with food and well wishes, and even Tom Morrison became slightly emotional as he toasted the new couple. "To Nathan and Wilhelmina," he said, raising his glass. May your life together be filled with love, laughter, and excellent biscuits." Everyone laughed, and Wilhelmina felt a wave of affection for these people who had welcomed her so completely into their community. After the celebration, Emily tactfully retired to her room early, leaving Nathan and Wilhelmina alone in the house for the first time as husband and wife. They sat together in the parlor, Nathan's arm around Wilhelmina's shoulders, both of them slightly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had done. "Are you happy?" Nathan asked quietly. "Happier than I have ever been," Wilhelmina assured him. "Are you?" "Beyond measure." He kissed her temple, then her cheek, then her lips. "Thank you for taking a chance on me, on us. Thank you for teaching me everything," Wilhelmina said with a smile, echoing his words from months ago. "Not just cooking, but how to be brave, how to work hard, how to believe in myself." They moved to Nathan's bedroom, which was now their bedroom, and Wilhelmina felt nervous anticipation flutter in her stomach. But Nathan was gentle and patient, treating her with the same careful attention he gave to everything he cared about. They came together slowly, learning each other, and Wilhelmina felt a sense of rightness that confirmed every choice she had made. Life as Nathan's wife was everything Wilhelmina had hoped for and more. They worked side by side during the days, training horses, maintaining the ranch, planning for the future. Emily remained with them, a valued part of the household, and the three of them formed a close-knit family unit. Wilhelmina's cooking skills continued to improve. She experimented with new recipes, learning to adapt Eastern dishes to Western ingredients. She became known in Angel's camp for her excellent pies, and neighbors would sometimes stop by hoping for a slice and some conversation. One afternoon, in March of 1877, Gerald Hutchins came to the ranch. Wilhelmina was in the kitchen when she heard his voice outside speaking to Nathan. She froze, a wave of old anxiety washing over her, before forcing herself to straighten her shoulders and walk to the door. Gerald looked the same as she remembered: neat, prosperous, self-satisfied. He was speaking to Nathan with barely concealed condescension, explaining that he was looking to purchase a horse and had heard Nathan had some quality stock. Then Gerald saw Wilhelmina, and his eyes widened in surprise. "Miss Harper, I did not realize you were still in Angel's camp." "It is Mrs. Aldrich now," Wilhelmina said calmly. "I married Nathan in December." Gerald's gaze swung between them, clearly trying to process this information. Nathan moved closer to Wilhelmina, his hand settling at the small of her back in a possessive gesture. "Congratulations," Gerald finally said, though his tone suggested he thought no such thing. "I am surprised you remained in California after our unfortunate misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding," Wilhelmina said clearly. "You made it plain that you valued domestic skills over character. I am grateful you did, because it led me to exactly where I was supposed to be." Nathan's hand squeezed her waist gently, a silent show of support. Gerald's face flushed with obvious displeasure. "Yes, well. About that horse, I do not think I have anything suitable for you," Nathan said evenly. "Good day, Mr. Hutchins." Gerald sputtered in indignation, but Nathan simply guided Wilhelmina back into the house and closed the door firmly. Once inside, Wilhelmina started laughing, a release of tension and triumph. "Did you see his face?" she gasped between giggles. "He was absolutely scandalized." "He is an idiot," Nathan said, pulling her into his arms, "and I am grateful for his idiocy every single day." In May, Wilhelmina discovered she was pregnant. She told Nathan one evening after dinner, her heart racing with excitement and nerves. Nathan stared at her for a long moment, then let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around the kitchen while she laughed and told him to put her down. "We are having a baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "We are going to be parents." Emily was thrilled, immediately beginning to plan and prepare. She sewed baby clothes and blankets, sharing advice and stories from when she had helped care for neighbors' children. The house filled with excitement and anticipation. Nathan became almost comically protective. He did not want Wilhelmina to lift anything heavy, to work too hard, to do anything that might endanger her or the baby. Wilhelmina found it endearing, even when it became slightly stifling. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one afternoon when he tried to prevent her from hanging laundry. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. But this is my baby, our baby." Nathan looked at her with such love and concern that her annoyance melted away. "I just want to keep you both safe." "We are safe," she assured him, kissing him softly. "And I promise to be careful, but I also need to keep living my life." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer. Wilhelmina continued to work, though she gradually reduced her physical activities as her body changed. She spent more time cooking and planning, preparing meals that could be stored for after the baby arrived. Emily helped her set up a nursery in one of the small, unused rooms, painting it cheerful yellow and assembling a cradle Nathan had built with his own hands. In early February of 1878, after a long and difficult labor, Wilhelmina gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Samuel James Aldrich after Nathan's father and Jack Morrison. Nathan held his son with such tenderness and awe that Wilhelmina felt her heart expand with love. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You are both perfect." Samuel was an easy baby, happy and healthy, with his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. Wilhelmina and Nathan were exhausted but elated, learning to navigate the challenges of new parenthood together. Emily was a tremendous help, taking turns with nighttime feedings and offering advice when they needed it. Life settled into a new rhythm. The ranch continued to prosper, with Nathan's reputation as a horse trainer spreading throughout the region. Wilhelmina managed the household with competence, her cooking now rivaling Emily's, her organizational skills keeping everything running smoothly. Samuel grew and thrived, a constant source of joy and wonder. One evening, when Samuel was about 6 months old, Wilhelmina sat on the porch with Nathan, watching the sunset while their son slept in her arms. Nathan had his arm around her shoulders, and they were both quiet, content in each other's presence. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if Gerald had not rejected you?" Nathan asked suddenly. Wilhelmina considered the question. "Sometimes. I would have married him, been miserable, and probably spent the rest of my life feeling like a failure because I could never meet his impossible standards. I am glad he was an idiot. So am I." Wilhelmina leaned against her husband, feeling the solid warmth of him, the absolute rightness of this life they had built together. "So am I." In the years that followed, Nathan and Wilhelmina's family continued to grow. In 1880, they had a daughter, Elizabeth Rose, with Wilhelmina's blonde hair and Nathan's dark eyes. In 1882, another son arrived, Thomas Nathan, named for Tom Morrison and his father. The ranch expanded, with Nathan taking on apprentices and teaching them the skills Jack Morrison had once taught him. Emily eventually married a quiet widower named Robert Chen, who owned a small farm outside Angel's Camp. They remained close, with Emily visiting frequently and helping with the children. The connection between the two families strengthened over the years, creating a network of support and love. Wilhelmina never returned to Boston. She exchanged letters with her aunt regularly, and eventually Aunt Catherine came to visit, expecting to find her niece living in primitive conditions. Instead, she found a thriving ranch, a happy family, and a niece who had never looked more content and fulfilled. "You have built a good life here," Aunt Catherine admitted on her last day before returning east. "I confess, I did not think you would manage it, but you have proven me wrong." "I had help," Wilhelmina said, glancing at Nathan, who was teaching Samuel how to saddle a horse. "And I learned that I was capable of more than anyone, including myself, ever gave me credit for." Over the years, Wilhelmina often thought back to that terrible morning when Gerald's telegram had arrived, destroying her carefully laid plans. At the time, it had felt like the end of everything. In reality, it had been the beginning. The rejection that seemed like such a disaster had been the catalyst that brought her to Nathan, to this life, to a happiness she could never have imagined in her Boston drawing rooms. She had learned to cook, yes, but more importantly, she had learned to trust herself, to work hard, to believe in her own capabilities. She had discovered that home was not a place or a set of expectations, but the people you chose to build a life with and the love you shared. Nathan had promised to teach her everything, and he had kept that promise. But in the process, she had taught him things too, that love was worth the risk, that the past did not have to define the future, that opening your heart could lead to the greatest joys life had to offer. By the time Samuel was old enough to take over significant responsibilities on the ranch, Nathan and Wilhelmina had been married for 25 years. Their children were growing into capable, confident adults, ready to make their own way in the world. The ranch had become one of the most respected in the region, known for quality horses and fair dealing. One spring evening in 1901, Nathan and Wilhelmina sat together on the porch, much as they had done countless times before. Their hair was streaked with gray now, their hands marked by years of work, but their love had only deepened with time. "You ever regret it?" Wilhelmina asked. Taking in a desperate woman who could not even boil water, Nathan pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "Not for a single moment. You were never desperate. You were brave, and you gave me the greatest gift of my life." "What gift is that?" "The chance to build something beautiful together. A family, a home, a life worth living." He smiled at her, his dark eyes still warm and full of love after all these years. "You taught me that love is not about perfection. It is about partnership, patience, and growing together." Wilhelmina thought about the girl she had been when she first arrived in Angel's camp. Frightened, uncertain, feeling worthless because she lacked a skill that seemed so important. That girl had learned to cook, but more importantly, she had learned to live fully, to love deeply, and to believe in herself. She had been rejected for not knowing how to cook, and a cowboy had said he would teach her everything. In the end, they had taught each other what truly mattered. That love, respect, and partnership could turn rejection into redemption, and disaster into the beginning of something wonderful. As the sun set over the California hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Wilhelmina Aldrich sat beside her husband, surrounded by the life they had built together, and knew that she had found exactly what she had been searching for. Not security, not status, not even cooking skills, though she had mastered those too. She had found home in a place and with a person she never expected, and it was more than she ever could have dreamed. Their grandchildren would come soon, children of Samuel and his wife Mary, of Elizabeth and her husband James. There would be new generations to teach, new stories to tell, new lives to watch unfold. But at the heart of it all would always be this: a woman who had been rejected, a cowboy who had offered to teach her, and the love that had grown between them through patience, persistence, and the simple act of choosing each other every single day. The ranch would continue long after they were gone, a testament to what two people could build when they believed in each other. And somewhere in the future, perhaps someone would tell the story of Wilhelmina and Nathan Aldrich, the woman from Boston who came west and learned to cook, and the horse trainer who taught her that her value was never measured by her skills in the kitchen, but by the strength of her character and the size of her heart. As darkness fell and the stars began to appear overhead, Nathan and Wilhelmina went inside together, hand in hand, ready for whatever the future might bring, secure in the knowledge that they would face it together, just as they had faced everything else for the past quarter-century. Their love story had begun with a rejection and a promise to teach, but it had become so much more. A testament to second chances, to the power of patience and partnership, to the way two broken pieces could come together and create something whole and beautiful. It was a story of the American West, of courage and determination, of building a life from nothing but hard work and hope. And it was a story that would endure, passed down through generations, a reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are simply doorways leading us toward the best ones, if we are brave enough to walk through them and strong enough to keep going when the path gets difficult. Wilhelmina had walked through that doorway on a Tuesday morning in September of 1876, heartbroken and lost. On the other side, she had found Nathan Aldrich, a life beyond her wildest dreams, and a love that would last not just a lifetime, but through all the years and generations to come. And in the end, that was the only thing that truly mattered.